how to start watercolor painting. In this video, I'm going to tell you about 7 things that I really wish I had known before starting to paint in watercolors. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel you'll find all things watercolor, as well as drawing tutorials, a little bit of mixed media, even some inspirational stuff and business too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the little bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video here a week on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. Now, when I started learning to paint, there were actually some things that I got right, and that might be a subject for a future video. I'm considering making another one about that, but there are also some things that I didn't understand, I didn't realise, and that I got wrong. Now, the main reason that you watch people on YouTube, the same reason that I watch people on YouTube, is we're looking for that expertise. We want to jump ahead. We don't want to make all those silly mistakes. We don't just want to be floundering around on our own. If we can learn from other people's journeys to move a little bit faster. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to go through the 7 most important things that I really wish I'd known before I started painting. You can learn from my mistakes and get the results that you want a little bit quicker. Now, the first thing that I wish I'd known before learning to paint watercolours is that starting to do whole paintings isn't really the best way to proceed. Because, to put it frankly, you've got very little chance of success. There's so much goes into a full painting. You have to have drawing skills, you have to understand colour mixing, you have to understand your medium, how composition works. You even have to know how to manipulate the paintbrush. The chances of you getting all of that stuff right as a complete beginner are pretty much zero. So far more important than trying to paint whole paintings and perhaps being disappointed is to get to know your materials. Now, one thing I did do correctly when starting out was I made colour charts, but I should have actually taken it much further and looked at the properties of the paint. So if you're starting to do whole paintings and you haven't even made a colour chart, it's a bit like going into your fridge and all of the vegetables are in opaque black bags and you're having to pull things out of the fridge with the hope of making a nice dinner. You can't even see what's in the bags. It's the same with your paint colours. Doesn't matter what medium you're using, the colours on the label or the colour on the end of the pencil is never ever accurate. You have absolutely no chance of selecting even the right colours unless you make little swatches at the very least. So you want to make colour charts, you want to take it further than that, you want to consider the properties of the paint and just play around with it. Is it a weak colour? Is it a strong colour? Not all watercolours are the same, they're not like wall paint. And whilst we're on the subject, I apologise for the plain background, I am actually painting the walls in here at the moment. But wall paint is formulated to be exactly the same. Watercolours are still made a lot of the time from natural pigments. That means they all behave differently. Some are very granular, some are very smooth, some are very weak, and some are very strong. And you really want to get to grips with all of that stuff, or at least have a basic idea of it before you start going on to whole paintings. You also want to get used to the different brushes and how the paint works. Before the pandemic, I used to do a whole day just on watercolour techniques. I used to do day courses. People would come along and we'd paint 30 or 40 different watercolour techniques. There was never a subject or a finished painting in sight. It was such a useful day for everybody. I do have a complete beginner's watercolour techniques course that's linked to in the video description if you're interested in that. I also have free tutorials here on YouTube. I've got one, I'll link to it above actually, and that will tell you some basic brush strokes that you can use. But that basic stuff, you know, manipulating the paint, getting used to the colours, just moving it around the paper without any pressure, is so much more important than trying to do a whole picture. Of course, everybody wants to paint a picture. That's why you started painting, isn't it? But it's not always the best place to start. And when you do start painting whole pictures, do understand that the chances of you getting everything correct in that picture are pretty minimal. You want to just be looking at improving one thing or working on one thing each time. So if you've done a painting and the sky is really good but the buildings are awful, it doesn't matter, you've got a good sky. Take it one step at a time and increase your chances of success by really getting to know the medium, what the colours look like, what it behaves like, and how it moves on the paper before you worry about creating whole paintings. The next thing I wish that I knew before starting to paint is that you don't have to do all of the drawing in one go. And I never do these days because I tend to work on very big, very complex pictures, and actually you can get completely lost in drawing. Now, I am not advocating for skipping the drawing stage. This is not what I'm telling you at all. In fact, drawing is really important. and you should at least map out the main elements of your painting so you know where everything's going and you're happy with that before you start painting. But there are a lot of advantages to doing the drawing as you go along, and also to sometimes removing parts of the drawing as you go along. The more layers of watercolour that you have on top of graphite pencil, the more the pencil is going to be trapped in and be impossible to remove at the end. So let's look at an example. Let's look at the idea of painting a wall. Now you might draw the outside of the wall, just literally the shape of the wall, and then you could put a background colour in, perhaps a light grey, and that would be the gaps between the bricks, and then you go on to painting the bricks themselves. Now why not at that stage then draw the bricks in, because that's when you need them. You haven't trapped them underneath that first layer of paint, and if you paint carefully in between them, so you're not actually painting on top of those pencil marks, they'll be easy to remove as well. Another example of when I remove drawing as I go through a painting is when I have a line that delineates between one area of paint and another. So I have a pencil line, I've got paint on one side, different colour on the other side. Now I need that pencil line because I can't see where to stop painting. However, once I've painted up to one side of that line, I don't need that pencil line anymore because I've now got the first layer of paint showing me where that line ends. So at that stage, what I'll often do is allow the painting to dry, remove the pencil mark, and then put the other section of paint up to the line where the first section was. Another advantage of doing the drawing part way through is that it stops you getting completely lost in things. So one of the things that I like to do is very complex botanical subjects. I'm doing a painting at the moment. I'll put a picture up actually, and it's going to be sunflowers. It's actually a field of sunflowers. There are some main sunflowers in the front, but it's a field of sunflowers. I've put the sky in so far, and I've drawn 3 of the sunflowers and 1 of the buds. Now there are multiple other smaller sunflowers, and there are an awful lot of leaves. There's a whole tangle of leaves in the foreground. Now imagine what would happen if I did all of that drawing in one go. I'm likely to get lost in it. You've probably done this yourself. Perhaps you've drawn a flower and some leaves, and then you've accidentally painted one of the petals green because you thought it was a leaf. So this is another time when it's a real advantage to do part of the drawing later on. So I'm not advocating for going straight in with the brush and not doing any drawing. You know, even in the simplest of landscape, you might want to perhaps just put where the horizon line is at the very least, and 1 or 2 other elements. I'm not advocating for skipping the drawing stage. I'm merely saying that if the picture is very complex, if there are any areas that are very complex, you might want to do some of the drawing later on. Another reason, and it's a bit crass this one, but I really get bored if I have to do 6 hours of drawing before I get on with the painting, which is the bit that I really enjoy. I'm losing the will to live basically. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing some elements of your drawing partway through the picture. There's also nothing wrong and a big advantage to removing parts of the drawing as you go through the painting. Always make sure it's dry at that stage, obviously. Don't be rubbing onto damp paper, that won't end well for you. But I have found painting so much more pleasurable since I've taken the drawing in stages, and I wish I'd known that before I started. The next thing that I wish I'd known before starting to paint, and this is something that I think affects every single beginner. I see it written so many times online and I get so frustrated with it, and I feel so bad for the person asking the questions because I was there myself and it's just heading down a dead end. And that is when you're trying to copy another artist's style, or you're trying to inflict a type of style on yourself. Now when I started learning to paint, it was quite a long time ago. Yes, there were computers, it wasn't pterodactyls were not flying through the air. I'm not quite that old. But computers weren't widely used to watch things like YouTube videos, and so if you wanted to learn something, you went down the library and got a book or a DVD out. So I got books, I got videos, I got DVDs, and I tried to learn to paint from those. But what would happen is this: I'd go down to the library and I'd find a book, and it would be a particular artist. They would have a particular style. I remember very distinctly, can't remember who the artist was. It was a British artist, but I went and got this book from the library and I absolutely loved the style. A lot of it was boats and harbour paintings. There were all sorts of really fun things done, little bits of collage, and a lot of techniques, a lot of impressions of things, things like coins left in the paint. It was very gimmicky. It worked well for that artist. I really admired the style. I came home and I thought, oh, that's my style now, I'm doing that. And I had a go at working in the same manner, and it was absolutely disastrous. It didn't suit me at all. I couldn't understand why something that had worked for this artist who wrote the book wasn't working for me. And the reason was very, very simple. I wasn't him. I'm female for one thing. You can't paint in a style of another person. You are, I'm afraid, going to have to find your own style. And the other bit of bad news is it may not even be the style that you admire the most or that you would like to paint in. Now, we all admire loose painting, and so often I see people say, can I have a loose painting tutorial? You know, and they're complete beginners. How do I learn to paint loosely? You don't is the answer. You don't paint loosely. You don't learn to paint abstract paintings. You progress to loose painting and towards abstraction after many, many years and probably decades of learning to paint. And if it's not your personality style, you may never get to loose painting. You may be meant to be a botanical artist. Who can say? Until you take that journey, you won't really know where it leads you. What I would say is that it's something to do with personality. Now, as somebody who is a self-confessed neat freak, if you went into my kitchen and pulled out the drawer, you'd find everything labelled, and you'd find that that one jar that's not the same shape as all the other jars is really, really annoying to me. I'm a neat, tidy, annoyingly organised to the point of OCD person. So why I ever thought that my painting style would be something that was completely opposite to my own personality is beyond me. So yes, you can learn from other artists, you can learn from me, you can learn from all of the other really good artists on YouTube, but please don't imagine that you can just take on their style or that you are meant to paint like them. Just take what you need, take what resonates with you, take what feels right for you and disregard the rest. All you need to worry about when you are starting to learn painting in any medium whatsoever is understanding the mechanics of the medium. You need to understand colour mixing, composition, drawing and techniques that apply to that medium. The style will come later. It will sort itself out. And if you're looking at artists whose style you really admire, that's wonderful. But just remember that you are not them. You are not meant to paint exactly the way that they do. You are only meant to paint in the way that you paint. And if you're thinking, I don't have a style, give it time, it will appear. The next thing that I wish I'd known before starting to learn to paint is the importance of composition. So I went through all the stages of painting. I went through the stage of not being that good at painting. I went through that annoying middle stage where you're good at some bits and not good at others. And then I progressed onto a third stage where I really was very competent with the paintbrush. I was good at painting individual objects, but for some reason my pictures looked awful. Now, I spoke about this in my last video. I've just done a video on basic composition tips. I'll link to that video at the end of this video because for me, composition was absolutely the last thing I got the hang of. I just couldn't get my head around it. I didn't understand how it worked and I didn't realise the huge role it plays in making a painting either good or bad. Now, the good thing is it can be learned. Now, if you are already perhaps a keen photographer, you may actually have a very good eye for composition already. Now, I was not a good photographer. I'm actually a much better photographer now. I'm talking about composing photographs. You know, I still have the camera on auto because I'm hopeless with tech. But when it comes to composing a photograph, I actually found that my photography improved once I got the hang of painting composition. So it can go the other way around as well. If you're already very good at composing photographs, you may already have a good eye for painting composition. But if you are like me and you find that you're just completely clueless, you've no idea, and you do paintings that should be good because the elements are good, but they absolutely look awful, then do have a look at the video I'm going to put up at the end of this video. It's going to give you some really basic rules to follow. Now, there are no hard and fast rules with composition and all rules are meant to be broken, but when you're just starting out, it's really, really helpful to follow a few basic composition rules. And those of you that subscribe to me on Patreon as well will have had a free downloadable composition guide sent to you when you joined Patreon. So do go back and have a look at that as well. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, then you want to check out the video that I will link to at the end of this video. The next thing I wish I'd known when starting watercolour painting is how much of a benefit using watercolour pencils alongside watercolours are. Now, of course, like most people, I tried out watercolour pencils. I don't think I had a very good brand. I think I tried them out a little bit before I tried actual painting out, and I'm a real lover of strong, bright colour. So I was never hugely attracted to watercolour pencils as a medium in their own right. I almost pretty much went straight onto painting and didn't pick up the watercolour pencils again. What I didn't understand was that when you get a good brand of watercolour pencils, they are really strongly pigmented, and I also didn't realise that they have multiple uses alongside watercolours. Now I've used them in lots of videos here on YouTube, and I'll link to a video above in the information cards that will link to some basic techniques that I use for adding watercolour pencils to my own paintings. They really can transform your paintings, and they are so much faster for adding detail than using a tiny little brush. If you can't see that video in the information cards above because it doesn't show on all devices, do have a look in the video description. And whilst you're in the video description, I also have some really cool free downloadable PDF guides about watercolour painting that you can grab for no money at all. The next thing I wish I'd known before starting to paint in watercolours is that a bad drawing never becomes a good painting. And this is true for any medium, so whatever medium you are learning, please make sure that your drawing is good before you add paint to it. Now, if you have a drawing and it's good drawing and you add paint to it and it becomes more colourful, it will usually look more attractive. Although there is a certain charm to monochrome work, most of us really enjoy looking at colour, so you can really improve your drawings with colour. But here's the thing, if it's a bad drawing, colour's going to make it worse. It's going to show up every mistake. So if you've ever been of that mindset where you've done a drawing, you're getting ready to paint and you've done a drawing and you look at it and you think, well, it's not quite right, hopefully it won't notice. Once I put the paint on, it'll probably improve it. I'm here to disillusion you completely. A bad drawing never ever becomes a good painting. The paint will only make it worse. Please make sure, doesn't matter if it's a really complex drawing or a really simple drawing, if you have to do it again, but please don't give yourself the heartbreak of trying to improve a bad drawing by putting paint on it. This is most noticeable as well with portraits. I see people so often go onto Facebook and other art forums and say, well, something's wrong with my portrait painting, can you help me? Do I need more shadow? Does the hair need to be a little bit darker? And I look at it and I think it doesn't matter what you do to it now. It doesn't matter what colours you adjust, it doesn't matter how much shadow you put on, the underdrawing is wrong. If the drawing is wrong, you do not stand a chance of getting a good painting out of it. So please do concentrate on your drawing, do concentrate on learning drawing skills. Always make sure that you don't make the same mistake I did in thinking that adding a little bit of colour will improve a bad drawing. Now, the next thing that I wish I'd known before starting to paint, and this doesn't just go for watercolour painting, actually this goes for any medium, and that is that there's no right way to be an artist. There's no right way to incorporate art into your life, and there's so much guilt involved. There's this real stereotypical idea of what an artist is and what it means to be creative, and you can end up just feeling like you're doing something wrong. You can get this imposter syndrome. Let's give you a few examples. For example, I don't use sketchbooks. I don't sketch on a regular basis. I never have done. I've never kept a sketchbook. I don't like sketching. Now, you might think this is unusual when I'm such a big advocate for drawing skills, but for me, drawing is just a way of getting to the painting part. So yes, I definitely believe that drawing is important, but I don't sketch just for the pleasure of it. Occasionally I will work in a monochrome medium, something like charcoal, and I might decide that I want to do a full sort of fine art drawing. That's one thing, but keeping a sketchbook and sketching everything I see, it's just not something that I've ever done. And I figured out years ago that I actually use a camera as a sketchbook. So when I'm out and about, if I go to a new city or something like that, and I want to capture things, I just take lots of photographs and then I come back and work on them in the studio. Now, there are no doubt a lot of people that would try to make me feel guilty for that, and all artists should keep sketchbooks, it's very important. Well, maybe it is, but it's just never been my thing. It's never been something I've wanted to do. And because I have been an art tutor for about 20 years, I find as well, because I'm constantly teaching other people to draw, and until the pandemic I was teaching out in the real world every single week, multiple classes and courses, literally thousands of students over the years, because I was always teaching drawing to other people, I never lost that drawing skill. Now, you might be completely the opposite to me. Perhaps you love using sketchbooks and never really want to do full paintings. Perhaps you're feeling a bit guilty because people keep sort of telling you that you should be actually making something of your sketchbooks and making a full proper painting that goes in a frame. And perhaps you don't enjoy that at all. Perhaps you do enjoy that daily sketching and those loose sketches and just recording what you see around you. What I'm trying to say is that neither is right and neither is wrong. Let's look at outdoor painting. Now, I have that thing called Raynaud's syndrome where my hands go numb if it's even the slightest bit cold, and my fingers go white and I can't move my hands. The weather in the UK is not wonderful. Now, I'm not saying that I never ever paint outdoors, that I don't get some pleasure from sitting in the garden occasionally in the summer and painting, But you know what? I prefer painting indoors. I like being warm, I like being comfortable, I like having all my stuff around me, I like not having to worry about where there's a water source or what insects are going to land in my work. I like painting indoors, and I don't see why anyone should make me feel bad for it. Now, some people that watch fine art channels like mine are actually just looking for techniques and little bits of help. They actually use their watercolour paints to make crafts, to paint cards, to paint bookmarks. They never have an ambition of making a full portrait or landscape painting, and that's absolutely fine too. If you are here learning techniques from me because you like to use them in colouring books, that is absolutely fine. There's this real stereotype of the way artists are. You know, it's not just about the practice of producing art either. There's this whole stereotype about the way you're supposed to live. Well, I can tell you my studio is very, very neat, almost to laboratory standards. My house is tidy. I do not start the day by drinking gin at 10 a.m. I do have some kind of creative traits in that I tend to stay up very late and get up very late, so there's that. But what I'm saying is that you need to find your own way when learning to paint in watercolours or any other medium. Don't worry about stereotypes. Don't worry about the way you're supposed to work as an artist. Don't worry if you prefer painting from photographs to real life. Don't worry if you prefer painting indoors or outdoors. Don't worry if you only want to learn to paint for your own pleasure and never even want to show other people the paintings. There is no right or wrong way to be an artist, so please follow your heart. You'll be so much happier when you're not worrying about those pressures and those stereotypes that the rest of the world seems to place on you. Do let me know in the comments if you found this video helpful, and if there are any things that you wish you had known before you started painting, do share those with me as well, because other people reading the comments can learn from your experiences as well as from mine. Don't forget to pop into the video description and grab your free PDF downloadables. Now, we talked about watercolour pencils in this tutorial, and I'm actually currently building a course which is going to be watercolour pencil flowers. It's not ready yet, but the easiest way to find out when it's ready and also to get a big discount on the pre-order is to get on my mailing list, and the easiest way to get on the mailing list is just to download one of those free PDF guides. We also talked in this video about composition. I've got a video all about some simple composition rules and mistakes that you can make when composing a painting. You might have never thought about these things. They're really, really simple things, but they're going to improve the way your overall work looks. You can watch that video right now.